I think going into this now, I have a knowledge of what is in front of me. Whereas before, I went in just kind of, I have no idea. It's brutal. It's desolate. You make plans, and they're out the window. "88 days."
Nobody's counting. That's just a guess.
We'll get into this. Truth be told, I'm a little nervous. So I think going into this now, I have a knowledge of what is in front of me.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not the PCT. It's
Right.
unmarked in a lot of spots. It's brutal. It's desolate. It's far, but it's not that. I hope there's that trail community, but I'm a realist. Maybe it's not nervous. I'm approaching it with reverence, with maturity, and with a lot of respect. I would recommend anybody their first trail be the Pacific Crest Trail. Well marked, a huge trail community, very strong trail communities. The towns, the Trail Angels, easy on, easy off. You've got 704 miles to get you in shape even before you start climbing for the Sierras. I think the PCT was a perfect first trail. How many alternates does the CDT have? I mean, there's alternates of alternates off of alternates off of alternates. Yeah, it's one foot in front of the other. The CDT, I've got 3,000 miles under my belt, and I'm nervous. I'm a little nervous.
So you started off this year thinking about Appalachian Trail, right? It's 2,200 miles now, I think. I just saw new numbers on it, but
yeah, I think it was 21 something. Now it's 22.
Yeah, and that's it's a big trail community. You have all those little shelters, right? Yeah, there's shelters. There's towns just about every day. I don't know. I just thought that is that's not the PCT, and you like the PCT so much for for all the reasons that the AT is not. So that's what made that face that you're going, that's an interesting choice. but then not long after that you changed. I'm doing the CDT. So why? What made that happen?
No, you saw right off the bat what I failed to see the forest through the proverbial trees. I guess I don't have a specific answer as to what made the change because I was AT 2021. That's what it was, but something didn't feel right, and I can't put my finger on what it is because I have nothing against the East Coast. I have nothing against the Appalachian Trail. I met people on the Pacific Crest Trail and hiked with them that they had already hiked the AT and they loved it. It just never felt right. One night, me and my wife were just discussing it, and she thought, well, what's the other part of the Triple Crown? I says, well, the CDT, the Continental Divide. And we started looking at it, and it just felt right. And then we started looking at reasons why it might look right. It's very, very close to where I live in Salt Lake, which would afford friends and family and loved ones, the ones that are really supportive of this. We were already planning out 2, maybe 3 locations where she's got a trail name now. I didn't know if you knew that, but my wife now is
Bearbait.
Bearbait. Yeah. So Bearbait can come out with my youngest, and they're gonna see me in Encampment, Wyoming, and they're gonna see me for sure if I get that far. In West Yellowstone, Montana, my old stomping ground. CDT goes right through there. And then I got some people from work that want to come out and see me in parts of Colorado and then up by the border. And then what's really interesting, this company I work for right now, we'll get into this, I understand, that very supportive. They're based out of Calgary.
Okay.
Which is
how handy.
Not that much on the map.
Yeah.
And they're very supportive. They're all watching, not all, but a lot of them are watching the PCT vlogs now and getting really hook, line, and sinker. And so I just thought, I got it just felt right. And I think and now now that the decision's been made, I look at what I fell in love with the Pacific Crest Trail. I loved that first 500, 600, 700 miles. I loved it all. Don't get me wrong, but I just I've lived in the Grand Tetons and Jenny Lake and Yellowstone and Wyoming. To go out there in the desert, I just fell in love with it. Well, when you start the Appalachian Trail, you do not hit desert.
It's not the desert.
and you know, and I love that trail. It was just the CDT is the closest thing next to the PCT. Of the parts of the PCT, the part that I had the hardest time with was the last 2 weeks. The rain in northern Washington that time of year, it almost broke me mentally, physically, spiritually. And there's a lot of rain on the Appalachian Trail, so I'm saving that for the last. And with the fact that on the AT there's such a community and such a sense of support, and you can get in those trail towns almost every day, if not every second or third day you're in a town. My plan is to get Bear Bait out there, because she likes the idea of a hotel every other night or every third night and be able to take a shower. And more than anything, to a mama of 2 little cute girls, signal to be able to check in. I could never get her on the Pacific Crest Trail for any long distance of time, or the CDT for that matter, just because she'd be so isolated from family. So once the decision was made to hike the CDT, it just felt right, and that burning in my soul that when I started to hike the PCT, it was just there. And that's the thing. I don't have nothing against those viewers out there that have fallen in love with the Appalachian Trail, because I get it, I do, but I just don't have that burning in my soul to go do it. Another reason why, if I need the AT to get the Triple Crown, I'm hiking the AT.
Right.
But what better way to reinvigorate myself towards it if I'm taking my wife out for possibly her first big hike? So I'm also being kind of greedy in that, in wanting her with me, because it will help.
Yeah, it's extra motivation. Whatever motivation you get to do something great, you should take it. I think.
Absolutely.
What are you going to do different than the PCT? Kind of compare the two. Where your mind is at, where your prep is at?
Boy, that's a good question. As far as like any changes in gear, I'm really not. I want to say my base weight, and this is just off the top of my head, I want to say my base weight for the Pacific Crest Trail, I say I was probably low 20, 21, 22. And I've got that base weight down to 17 right now. And I'm pretty happy about that. I upgraded a couple things. And mine, it's 17, 18 now, just because of my vlog that I have. And I do have to take a certain amount of electronics to do that. If I didn't do the vlog, I could knock 4 pounds off of that, which would put me in a very comfortable 12, 13, 14 pounds right there. But as far as gear, I'm not taking anything different than I did on the Pacific Crest Trail. The one part of the trail that gives me the most anxiety, I'll tell you right now, is your home state of Colorado. You're dealing with the elevation, and I live at elevation, and I didn't have a problem at Forester Pass, and the 7 big passes of the Sierras. I never had an issue there. But there's, even on a low snow year, there's going to be snow at 12,000 plus feet. But for Colorado, I'm going to take a set of good paper maps. But as far as gear, there's not much different. Same amount of 2 pair of socks, pair of underwear. I upgraded my rain gear, but really, it's just I think it's all going to be up here. I think that's where I'm approaching it differently. On the Pacific Crest Trail, I was so enamored. I'm a very social person. I was so enamored with the trail towns and the tramways and the community, and wheeling into a town that, after doing, 200-300 miles and going to a pizza place or a pub, like you own it, and just hanging out. And I did a lot of that in 2019. And then when I went back in 2018, I went back in 2019, I hiked with an absolute purpose. I hiked from sun up to many times till sundown. And my daily mileage went through the ceiling, and I just started tearing it up. And I think that will benefit me, the lack of trail community, and maybe the lack of towns, and the lack of just people on the trail. I foresee myself racking out pretty incredible miles, just because on the PCT in 2019, when I was by myself, and nothing against those that I hiked with, because some of those people I will be friends with for the rest of my life, and we communicate weekly. But when I got to where I was on my own, I was flying. Those were the biggest on a bar graph, when I was solo, those are the biggest mileage days. And I think the CDT will benefit me there. Will I team up with people? Absolutely. But there's just not a whole lot of towns. There's not a whole lot of, cool places. You don't have Idlewild. You don't have Julian. You don't have Yosemite.
I would guess that your time on the Colorado Trail is probably going to be the most people that you'll see.
Yeah. And I've heard that.
Yeah. And everything outside of that is probably going to get less populated.
Yeah.
I would think. So how far in advance are you looking at coordinating with friends for drops? And
in just looking at the first, when you approach a trail like this, you look at the first 2 weeks to start, because if it's going to be a drop, you need to probably mail that about the time you leave your house. I'm planning about 2 weeks in advance,
right?
Merely because in the first 2 weeks, I'm going to need a couple of mail drops to be there. The first 70 to 80 miles of that trail, up till you get to Lordsburg, which I think is about 80 even, there's not a lot of water. So I'm going down, something I never had to even think about with the PCTs. I'm going down 2 to 3 days early, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to stash my own water for the first 80 miles, which is very common. I am learning on the Continental Divide Trail. Then I get up into the area of Silver City and beyond, where water is more accessible, and I'm not too concerned about that. As far as visits from friends and family, the only one I've got set in stone right now is, we know the wife's going to come visit me in encampment, just because it's a straight shot on I-80 eastbound from Salt Lake City. She can be there in 5.5, 6.5 hours. But I learned on the Pacific Crest Trail, other than your gear and your career and your home and stuff that you leave, like you said to start off this segment, you make plans and they're out the window. I remember a PCT hiker that I talked to before I left, a friend of mine, Andrew. I asked him if he had any advice for me before I started the PCT, and he just looked at me and says, plan less. And it also gets very overwhelming if you try you can't. And I also learned on the Pacific Crest Trail. I was in Mammoth, and I had sent packages to Sierra City and Chester.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Sonora Pass, mile 1016.9, ended up hitching into South Lake Tahoe to see the kids and the family, and then found out the severity of what was going on at home with my mother-in-law's illness. I had sent, it's not a huge deal, but a couple $100 worth of food and supplies up to cities now that I'm not going to be in. So I also learned, plans change. So plan far enough ahead to be safe and to be realistic, but anything beyond that, and quite honestly, it can get very self-defeating, I think.
It takes some of the adventure out too.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because part of the attraction, the love affair that I have with this type of through hiking, long distance hiking, is just the spontaneity of it. Those are my most memorable experiences on the trail. Just, where are we sleeping? Right there. And that, if you plan that, you're not going to plan to sleep on the railroad tracks. It just
does that?
It takes away some of the fun of it. You want to know what part I'm looking forward to the most? From the border of Wyoming northbound, just that, because it's home, sagebrush.
Yeah.
I'm really, and I'm really, I know that sounds silly, but I'm, and I should, after dealing with New Mexico and Colorado, I should be in, the fat man should be gone, and I should be logging in some pretty decent miles in South and Central Wyoming. So
that's pretty flat through there too. So you'll be like there'll be a little dust thing behind your heels.
I think it starts to climb around, what is it? The pass, South Pass area. Yeah. It starts to get up into, and the Wind Rivers. Here's the crazy thing. I grew up in Wyoming. Never been to the Wind Rivers.
No.
I have the Tetons were my backyard, know. So I'm excited for that.
Okay, so let's talk about your employer real quick. I know that they have graced you with unpaid time off. Tell me how that came about. And
I'm the production foreman of this fabrication plant, and the plant manager really fell in love with my story of the Pacific Crest Trail. It was on my resume to explain the year off from law enforcement, because there's a gap. What were you doing? And I to this day, I kind of think it helped get me in the door. And then just talking on the water cooler and stuff, this guy, he's not in the position to do it himself, but he's very interested in it. He's interested, this guy, and I'll leave names out of it, but this guy goes probably twice a week and tries to run up and get up to Mount Timpanogos here in Utah and log his time. And he's very interested in that. And he's very interested in the human factor of trying to accomplish something so out there. So I'd been there 7, 8, 9 months. And this place I work, there's a pretty big learning curve on figuring out even what I'm supposed to be doing. But I developed a really good relationship with this manager there, just based on what I started out with, what 20 years in law enforcement, moved up to a supervisor, left 2 days after and went and hiked across he just fell in love with that. It didn't hurt that the production manager, so that I'm the foreman, then there's a production manager, and then there's the plant manager. We've been talking about the plant manager. The production manager is a retired Salt Lake County corrections officer that I supervised for several years. Now he retired and then he moved, and now I'm underneath him. So we have that friendship. So it was a little more than just employer-employee type of a thing. We're all, the three of us are very good friends. But the way it came about is, water cooler talk, and I mentioned, I want the Triple Crown. And he asked me, well, what does that entail? The plant manager. And I told him. And so about a week later, I approached him. I says, I'd like to take a couple of months and go out and hike as far as I can get on the Continental Divide Trail. And if I do that for like 2 months in 21, 2 months in 22, and 2 months in 23, I can have the whole thing. Because as you know, I did the PCT in 2 years and it worked out very good.
Right.
And he didn't even hesitate. He was sitting in his chair, leaned back. He had his feet up on his desk. He's had his mouth kind of flipping it like he does. He took his pen out and he immediately says, just do the whole thing. And I says, what about my job? And he says, you don't have to worry about your job. And I don't want to omit this. I went to my direct supervisor, the production manager, and I told him, and he was like, absolutely, I support you. But he did say this, I'm not happy about it. My guy, we work very good, but I support it. So for whatever it's worth, huge shout out to my employer. Yeah, I could not have fallen into a better position after 20 years of law enforcement, making the PCT. And shout out to those guys that are largely making this possible.
Very good, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you, my friend.
Talk to you soon.
For sure. Take it easy.
See ya.